Hello, my name is David Allen Arnold. I'm the helicopter cameraman of TV shows like Deadliest Catch, Monday Night Football, Amazing Race, the World Series, and Super Bowl. Welcome to the very first episode of my podcast. It's called Storytime. For 30 years, I have been flying around the world for hundreds of TV shows and even some Hollywood movies. So I have 30 years of adventure stories because we have been flying our cameras just above the treetops, sometimes between the trees. Sometimes we're flying right above the ocean waves or sand dunes in a desert, or we're flying over an active volcano, basically creating amazing works of art and, more importantly, telling stories. But until 10 years ago, I never told any of my stories. It's kind of complicated how this came to be, but it basically has to do with the fact that my job is sometimes so wild, it's basically sensory overload, and it can be hard to relate to. For example, one time we're working on this big, well known TV show in Hollywood, and we have a legendary director of photography in the helicopter. He's sitting up front next to the pilot. And I'm sitting in the back with the camera controls, and here we all come flying 80 miles an hour just above the crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean. And then we turn and climb up to the Santa Monica Pier, which has been shut down and emptied of all the tourists. So they kicked everyone off the pier so that we can have our Hollywood action sequence on the pier. And this director in the front seat, he has a radio so that he can cue several hundred actors and technicians and all these people that we call extras, which are people who just look like random crowd on the pier, but they're actually skilled Hollywood performers. And our director is supposed to say action on the radio to tell them that they can start walking and doing their thing, making it look like an everyday crowd of people walking and fishing and riding the roller coaster, eating their snacks and whatever on the Santa Monica Pier. But instead of saying action, the director is just sitting there with a blank expression on his face. So I come out of my viewfinder from the back seat and I'm staring at the back of his head. My pilot looks over from the helicopter controls and we're both just staring at this guy because my viewfinder, instead of a shot of beautiful Santa Monica Pier with people enjoying their life, I got several hundred people all standing like statues on this pier. They're on their start marks, ready to walk and play and cast their fishing poles, but they haven't moved. They're just standing there like idiots. Because when we came, whizzing down the shoreline, skimming the surf waves, and turned over to the pier and climbed to their eye level of all the people on the pier, we didn't get our masterfully choreographed action sequence on the pier, and all the performers are just standing there. So now we're staring at the director because we know this multi-million dollar production has just been wasted on this take that the editors can't use. And because our actors and extras haven't, heard their action cue over the radio. And I don't remember who spoke first, if it was me or the pilot, but we politely said, "Sir, you forgot to say action." And just like that, like a light bulb, he just snaps out of it. He says, "What? Oh, I'm sorry, gentlemen. Reset, back to one." Picks up his radio, he starts talking to his people on the pier, and he's directing again. so a call comes to our pilot on the airband radio. Hey, what the heck happened? So down on the pier with our hundreds of cast and crew members is a man that we call the assistant director, which sounds like a minor job, but it is not. Because, we have a director who's in charge of the creative choices and the storytelling of the show, but the assistant director is different. And he's one of the most important jobs on this TV show because the assistant director and his assistants are who actually supervise everyone on the pier. Every actor, every extra, every technician, every lighting and special effects person. The assistant directors are working through the logistics and the mechanics of every hour throughout this day of movie making. They're giving instructions, they're making adjustments to their instructions, they're basically helping to accomplish the mission of getting the shots that the editors can use to make this TV show. So these ADs are the best. They have incredible people skills. They have incredible attention to detail and a masterful knowledge of the filmmaking process and how to make 1,000 things to go right, so that each take is as good as it can be and the TV show gets what it needs, which is our shot list for the day completed and in the can and sent off to the editors. So the ADs are so important that they routinely carry 2 walkies, or in this case, 3 radios, because one of their radios they can use to talk to the helicopter. So they talk to all the actors and extras and everyone on their production walkies, and then they use the airband radio to talk to our helicopter pilot. So there's a quick back and forth between the movie pilot and the first AD. And me and the pilot don't want to throw the director under the bus and blame him for an expensive mistake. So our pilot just sort of explains that something didn't go quite right and we're going to have to go back and do it again. So the AD turns around to tell several hundred people what's happening. Okay, everyone, the helicopter's going to go away, but they're get ready because they're going to come right back, and you got to be ready for your action cue. It's going to come over the radio, and then you start to do your action on the pier, everyone, so be ready. But meanwhile, in the helicopter, me and the pilot are like, WTF? Like, this is a big setup with a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, and the people on the pier didn't get their action cue at the end of our move across the ocean. Like, what's going on here? So we fly back to what we call our number 1, which is the beginning of our move, and we get ready to make our move. The direction calls roll camera, or the director says roll camera, because we're shooting film. And so I hit a switch on our gyro-stabilized movie camera, and our monitors start to flicker because the film is rolling, and our mechanical mirror and shutter are now flashing or recording 24 pictures a second on the movie film. And now we're all going 100 miles an hour just above the wave tops. And I've got the movement of the ocean waves, the sunshine, the mountains in the distance, the miles of Santa Monica Beach. And now we turn and climb to the height of the pier. And now we're close enough so that my camera can see the people. And that's when the director needs to cue everyone to start moving and doing their action. But once again, he's just sitting there. After telling me to roll the camera and watching our carefully choreographed camera move over the ocean, he's just staring at the pier, and he's holding his monitor, which has my shot. But instead of a pier swarming with people and activity and action, it's hundreds of people all standing motionless like statues on the pier. So now me and the pilot are both talking to this guy. Hey, sir, you didn't cue them on the radio. And by the way, he has the only radio that can cue them. And I can just feel the stress of several hundred people waiting and not being able to work on what should be a spectacular scene on the Santa Monica Pier. And the AD calls screaming on the radio, WTF! Except he didn't say the letters, he said the words. This embarrassing mess just keeps happening time and again. And it's one of the first times I got to see a thing that you hear about a lot. It's called sensory overload. Everyone talks about sensory overload, but now I'm watching it in real time in this helicopter, and it's basically ruining everyone's afternoon. They've been planning this shoot for months. The amount of logistics and money payments that have to happen so that we can take over this pier is astronomical. And here we all are not getting our shots. Now, this movie pilot and I have done this kind of thing 100 times for, different TV shows and productions. And so we're literally just not aware of what this looks and feels like to a guy like our director, who is usually standing on the ground next to a bunch of cameras while people pretend to do things like walk and talk and shoot guns and every other thing that they do in fictional TV and movies. It's Hollywood, it's make-believe. But this is real. We are sitting in a vibrating machine that is so loud you can't hear yourself think, because right above our heads is a jet engine. just like what's on the wing of an airliner, except instead of spinning fan blades out on the wing, it's right above our heads. And this gas turbine is spinning 50,000 RPM, and it's screaming at a level that is difficult to describe. This noise in vibration is all consuming. And then there's a gearbox right above our heads, and the sound of a drivetrain that takes 50,000 RPM and reduces it to 400 RPM to spin our composite helicopter blades. So these gears make a lot of noise too, and vibration. And these helicopter blades are spinning so fast that the blade tips are supersonic. So each blade is chopping at the air so hard that it creates a pressure wave and a supersonic shock wave that you can hear several miles away on the ground. But we're not several miles away, we're sitting directly under all of this. It's like this, cacophony that goes everywhere we go. And it actually makes it hard to think if you're not used to it. And so we take this jet turbine powered supersonic chopping blades and we put it in the hands of a world-class camera mover. These Hollywood movie pilots are masters of art. They spent years learning how to carry my camera just above the waves of the Pacific Ocean, but not too close, so my lens doesn't get covered in sea spray. My lens is clean and the waves are flowing across my viewfinder in a magical way and at an angle. And then our pilot smoothly brings in just enough power to ease us up to the height of the pier. And it's beautiful. It's poetry in motion. But it's also death. It's scary. Being in the front seat of a helicopter, on a mission like this can be terrifying. And I put our director in the front seat on purpose. He's sitting up front next to the pilot so he can feel like the boss, sitting on this throne commanding hundreds of people. But more importantly, he has a perfect view inside and outside the machine. I give him a better view because that makes less chance that he'll get airsick and throw up in the middle of all this. Because I'm used to this so that I never even look outside. I'm just looking at my camera. And I can literally eat a sandwich while we're pulling G's, and my gyro stabilized camera sits perfectly still so that as our pilot pulls and banks and starts and stops, none of that motion is showing in the camera that I'm staring at. And in fact, the movement of the camera can be opposite of what my inner ear is feeling inside this helicopter that's, going all over the place. And I'm completely used to it because the human body can adjust to anything that you do 1,000 times. But this is confusing and disorienting and probably scary to our director. And his body and mind are perfectly designed by nature to help him avoid threats, like falling to his death. And this camera move is like getting shot out of a cannon. Our director is being thrown through the sky across the Pacific coastline, and then suddenly we stop at terminal height above the pier, and the beach and the waves and the Ferris wheel and the hundreds of workers and the cacophony of noise in the aircraft and the vibration. It's a lot. And we know that this should all work and the helicopter won't crash, but let's be honest, helicopters crash sometimes. And he knows that. And, even when working on TV shows and movies, helicopters can crash. So now his brain has put all of that in and processed it, and it has basically pulled the plug on him. He cannot think or speak. He's frozen. He's just sitting there with sensory overload and a blank expression. He's not moving. He's not talking on the radio like he's supposed to. He's not doing anything. He's just frozen. Now, I wish I could tell the AD that's what's happening and that this whole mess is our director's fault, but I don't have a radio. I'm, sitting in the back seat. And besides, I'm outranked by the guy in the front seat who was completely screwing this all up and failing to cue the cast and crew on the pier. But the other thing is, I come from the old school of TV and movie making. My job is to make our director look good. I can't throw him under the bus. He's the leader of our team. If we mess up together and we take the blame together. And anyways, I don't even have a radio that I can use to talk to the AD. So Our movie pilot does damage control and he smooths things over with the AD over the airband radio, and they talk back and forth. They make a plan that the pilot will cue the cast and crew by calling the AD on the airband radio, and then the AD will then call everyone on the production walkies, all these people, and tell them to start moving, action. And after completely messing this up multiple times, it now goes perfect because the pilot and I have done this 1,000 times, and we know exactly when to cue the actors. So that's how we finish our day. So this is one of those stories that I never told anyone. The pilot and I just worked together to make our director look good, and we got the shots. And even though the AD wanted to kill us all because it was a logistical nightmare on this pier, they must have spent $100,000 an hour for a day of filming on this pier. But in spite of our embarrassing hiccups, we got it done as a team and we delivered the footage to the editors. But the reason I never told this story is significant. As a matter of fact, in those days, I was the most private member of the crew. I did this job for decades. Hundreds, thousands of times I did things just like this Santa Monica Pier setup. And I never said a word to anyone about it. In fact, in those days, I never flew with a GoPro. So the images that you're seeing are from other helicopter flights. In those days, I never even took still photos at work. I just made my shots for the TV show or the movie from, using my helicopter camera, and then I went home to my quiet life. At home, I just got very comfortable living a quiet, anonymous life, and I never talked to anyone about what I do at work. My own friends and family never heard a word about what I did at work. In fact, no one in my life has ever heard this story. And I was very comfortable like that. I would have taken 30 years of flying stories to my grave. But if you've been reading my books, you know that something happened in my quiet little town, and I had to start sharing stories. And to do that, I had to start writing books. So if you like stories like the one I just told from the Santa Monica Pier, check out my social media. Today I am public, and I'm sharing thousands of pictures and videos from inside and outside the helicopter. If you're listening to this podcast, look for a video version because I will include videos and pictures to illustrate the stories that I'm sharing here on this podcast. I am still flying around the world, and every day I post things from my adventures. Today, I not only fly with a GoPro, on Deadliest Catch, I'm rolling 5 GoPros in the helicopter. Plus, I'm recording the feed from the gyro-stabilized movie camera as we're hovering next to the crab boats on Deadliest Catch. Now, if you want to read some stories, check out Help From Above. That's my True Adventure series on paperback and Audible. And thank you. Thank you for listening to the very first episode of my very first podcast, Storytime with David Allen Arnold.